We will go ahead and get this meeting underway. Welcome to the October 11th, 2024 Workforce Development Committee meeting. My name is Wendy Strack, Chair of the committee. Before we convene, I'd like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. Where the protection of the paramount is let me try that again. Where the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. Committee members will be participating remotely from private, non-public sites. The public may participate in person or remotely, or by attending in person at the DCA headquarters at 1625 North Market Boulevard, Suite S102. I will announce when we are accepting public comment on the various issues, and the meeting moderator will open the lines as appropriate. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, would you please provide the audience with instructions on how they may participate during the meeting at appropriate times?
This is the moderator. When public comment is requested, I will turn on the question and answer feature to facilitate this. Comments should be limited to the topic addressed during that specific agenda item. We'll have instructions displayed on the screen each time, and you can click the question and answer icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or you can choose to raise your hand, which is next to your name on WebEx, or if you're an audio-only participant, you can press *3 on your device to raise your hand. We'll go in the order that comments are received, and you will be given 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. And at the end of the time, your microphone will be muted, and we'll move on to the next commenter. I believe that's all the instructions I have.
Great, thank you. We'll now officially call the meeting to order. And Christina, would you please call the roll to establish a quorum?
Good afternoon. Dr. Annette Walker?
Afternoon, thank you. Present. Public board member.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay. Public board member. See, Wendy, I get it. Pronouns she, her, and hers.
Eleanor Uribe?
Present. LCSW member.
Justin Huft?
Present. He, him, LMFT member.
Wendy Strack?
Present, public member.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. Board staff, would you like to introduce yourselves at this time?
Yes, hi, Steve Sodergren, the Executive Officer of the Board. You want to go?
Christy Shields, Regulations Counsel for the Board.
And Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the Board. Roseanne Helms, Legislative Manager for the Board.
Christy Berger, Regulatory Manager for the Board.
Sarita Risso, Special Projects and Research Analyst with the Board.
And that's it.
Okay. Now's the time for the public to introduce themselves if they would like, and this is completely voluntary. Is there anyone in the room there that would like to introduce themselves?
There is.
Shanti Ezrin, California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists.
Thank you. And that's it.
Okay. Moderators, or anyone online that would like to introduce themselves?
Yes, first I have Ben Caldwell.
FT.
Right. And I think, Ben, I'm going to unmute your microphone again. If you could let WebEx pause for a moment before you start speaking, because I think it's cutting off your introduction. So I'll unmute your microphone again for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Ben Caldwell, MFT. Good to be with you.
All right. And next I have Kathy Atkins. And also if you could let WebEx have a couple seconds before you start speaking so it doesn't cut you off.
Atkins from CAF. Nice to see you all.
All right. And lastly, it looks like we have Sarah Carrasco.
Hi, this is Sarah Kraska with William Jessup University.
All right, and I have Elizabeth Valacarcel.
Elizabeth Valcarcel, Program Manager for the Clinical Consultation for University of Phoenix. I'm the Clinical Director. Okay.
All right, and that appears to be everyone. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. And then we will be skipping item 3, deferring action on that one. So that takes us to agenda item 4, overview of the purpose of the committee. And Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, hi. Just giving you a quick overview of what we did on the last meeting, which was August 9th. We discussed the possible recommendation regarding permitting early eligibility to take the clinical examination and possibly any other additional changes to the licensing process. We also discussed the possible amendments to the child abuse and assessment and reporting coursework requirements for all board-regulated professions. And lastly, we discussed the licensure pathway survey and some of the data we received back from that. You'll notice in the memo, we have issues for discussion. Those are things that we had brought up originally when we started the Workforce Development Committee. A lot of those we're actually working on and we'll be talking about today. There are some others that we have not really touched on, which includes developing a practice exam for the board examinations and a review of the recruitment process for subject matter experts. And then additionally, looking at some data collection on statistics on the common application deficiencies and the average time it takes someone to get through the licensure process. So with that said, I'm not sure if the board has, if the committee has any other additional items they would want to put on this. Just really as a side thought, we do have, I'll be reporting later on the Workforce Development Committee goals, possibly short-term, long-term goals, which really incorporates these. So I'm almost thinking that this will probably be a next report on the overview of the committee's work will be that the short-term, long-term goals. We'll look at those. So I will open it, or Wendy, you can open it for discussion.
Great. Do we have any comments from committee members? Being none, I think we have a good list going there. Do we have any comments from the public on this item?
In-house, no.
Okay. Moderator, do we have any online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, you can click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand icon. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you on that. Now moving on to agenda item 5. Update and discussion regarding permitting early eligibility to take the clinical examination and other potential changes to the licensing process. And Roseanne, I think we're going to you for this one.
Yes, thanks. So applicants for licensure with the board as an LMFT, an LCSW, or an LPCC are required to take and pass 2 exams, a California Law and Ethics exam and also a clinical exam. The California Law and Ethics exam must be attempted within the first year of registration until it's passed. And the clinical exam may only be taken upon completion of all education requirements, the 3,000 required hours of supervised experience, and passing the California Law and Ethics exam. Once passed, the clinical exam score is valid for 7 years. And I should note in this discussion that LEPs have a sort of a different exam process, so that they would need to be a separate discussion if we decided to move forward with changes. LEPs are required to take and pass 1 exam upon completion of all their education and experience requirements. And so it's, like I said, it's a different process. So they're not included in this discussion today, but would need to be discussed in the future. Once an applicant has completed the required experience hours, they submit their license application for the board, and the board evaluates it. If all education and experience requirements are met and the law and ethics exam is passed, they're given eligibility to take the clinical exam. To maintain eligibility, the clinical exam needs to be attempted at least 1 year until passed. And experience hours are locked in, meaning they don't age while they are in the exam cycle. Once the clinical exam is passed, the applicant submits an application for initial license issuance, which is then issued. So at a previous committee meeting, this committee discussed whether permitting applicants to take the clinical exam early once a certain threshold of experience hours are gained would reduce barriers to licensure. And we included a discussion, and it's shown in attachment C, some background information, because there was recently a bill that allowed the Board of Psychology to permit taking their exams upon actually completion of their degree program, although part of their exam is splitting off and it would need to be taken after 1,500 hours of experience. But it would allow an earlier taking of the exam for psychology applicants. And so the committee at that time directed staff to examine the issue further, including relevant statutes and regulations that would need to be amended and other potential issues. And in looking at this and then looking at the statutes and regulations that need changing, it's really changing a piece of a whole process. And there's some other pieces in that process that could be addressed at the same time, potentially, that might also provide an opportunity to reduce some additional barriers. They could be addressed separately, but it might be more comprehensive to address them all at once, since it's making changes to a process that's kind of interrelated. So this proposal is sort of a holistic overview of other potential changes as well that could be made to sort of streamline the examination process. This proposal is just a rough draft. It's presented today as a first step to get the discussion started, to see what people like about the proposal, what they don't like about the proposal. And then we'll definitely need to obtain more feedback from legal counsel and other stakeholders, and modify the proposal if it were to move forward. So this is not like a final draft by any means. So I'm going to go through some of the potential changes, and then at the end, I'll open it up for discussion. Proposed language is shown in attachment A, and sort of a really brief summary of overall what this would look like is shown in attachment B. First, the timing of the clinical exam. The proposal would permit the clinical exam to be taken once an applicant has completed 875 hours of supervised experience performing direct clinical counseling. That's a departure from what we discussed last time. We had discussed last time allowing the exam to be taken at 1,500 experience hours. We had some feedback that instead requiring only looking at the direct clinical counseling hours might best prepare an applicant for taking the clinical exam. Under this proposal, the experience hours must be less than 7 years old at the time of application for the clinical exam. All education requirements for licensure would also need to be met before taking the clinical exam. The proposal is written so that the clinical exam can be taken at a time of the registrant's choosing, anytime after they meet the above requirements. So passage of the law and ethics exam would no longer be a prerequisite to taking the clinical. But when an applicant is ready to apply for full licensure, they would need to remember that their clinical exam score can be no more than 7 years old. Under this proposal, we would also likely need to make adjustments or delete the requirement and regulations that attempting the attempt the clinical exam every year to avoid abandoning. And that would get rid of locking in hours indefinitely, regardless of the age of those hours, once eligibility for the clinical exam is obtained. Instead, hours would expire gradually as they became 7 years old. That would eliminate the problem of an applicant who is suddenly who's in the exam cycle for many years with very old hours, who keeps taking the exam over every year. And then in 1 year they forget to take the exam and they suddenly lose all their hours because they're, let's say, 10 years old. That wouldn't happen anymore. On the flip side, those applicants could no longer lock those hours in indefinitely, and they would need to make sure that their hours were not more than 7 years old or expired. An applicant who is unable to pass the exam within 7 years would have to avoid losing hours by maintaining their associate registration and continuing to work until all supervised requirements are met. The board would likely need to build in a carve-out or grace period for those who are already clinical exam eligible and have older hours that are locked in if this piece were to move forward. And we did some, regarding the early taking of the clinical exam, we did some research at what some other states, we looked at some larger states and some nearby states. And Sarita actually did that research. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a second so she can summarize what she found.
Yes, so we did look into, I'll just kind of do an overview of 4 states that I looked into regarding their licensing process and when applicants or candidates are able to take the clinical exam. So for Arizona, various rules for the Arizona's Board of Behavioral Health Examiners were reviewed pertaining to licensure examination, clinical supervision, and supervised experience requirements for LCSW, LMFT, and LPC. According to Arizona's administrative codes, eligibility to take the clinical exam for both LMFT and LPC are similar in that the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners will deem applicants for LMFT and LPC licensure to meet the examination requirement if the applicant holds an active and in good standing an associate marriage and family therapist or associate professional counselor license. However, it was a little bit unclear when applicants are eligible to sit for the clinical exam for LCSW. That was during the time of reviewing Arizona's board rules. So I did make contact with the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners just for clarification. In response, they explained in part that Arizona, they don't require what they call a tier exam for counseling in LMF or in MFT, but it is required for social work. So the way it works for social work is if a person is licensed with the board as an LMSW and if they choose to upgrade to a LCSW, they will need to apply for such for LCSW. So once the board determines that they meet the supervised work experience, clinical supervision, and checks their background, the board will approve for them to take the clinical exam. So it's a little bit different than the LMFT and the LPC. And I should also note that effective September 29th of 2021, there was a Senate Bill 1089 in Arizona that gave amendments to Arizona statutes pertaining to social work, counseling, marriage and family therapy, and substance abuse counseling. That's another area that they license and regulate. So with this Senate bill, indirect client hours are no longer required to be tracked, but 1,600 hours of direct client hours are still required in addition to at least 100 hours of clinical supervision in no less than 24 months. So that's just something to keep in mind in regards to the supervised practice for the state of Arizona. Also, Oregon was looked into with the Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists. So the qualified to sit for examinations for an LMFT and LPC, the applicant is to submit, quote, a fully completed application that has been approved by the board. So per Oregon's administrative rule, one of the items required for the application for LMFT and LPC is, quote, documentation to prove experience requires have been met, or request for registration as an associate with a proposed plan to obtain required experience. So in other words, the applicant is to provide documentation showing that they met the experience requirements, or they can request for registration as an associate and provide a plan to obtain the required experience. So for social workers or clinical social work, Per the Oregon Board of Licensed Social Workers website, and as also outlined in attachment C of this memo, a CSWA is automatically given approval to take the ASW clinical exam when their completed plan is approved and all hour and time requirements have been met. So once the CSWA has documented 75 hours of supervision and 18 months of licensure, the candidate must be on track to complete the LCSW requirements within the 6 months following the request. And then the ASWB will allow the Oregon Board of Licensed Social Workers to issue approval for the CSWA to sit for the exam if the applicant desires to. And they're given a year's time to take and pass the exam. And then we also looked into Florida as well, just another big state such as California. So for licensure as a LCSW, the approved examination for clinical social workers is the clinical level objective multiple choice examination that's developed by ASWB. So starting on January 1st, 2023, applicants were deemed eligible to take the exam after they complete 18 months of documented experience in clinical settings. That does not include their practicum or other experience gained in their graduate program. And then applicants are to request prior approval before they contact the test provider that the Florida board is contracted with. And for LMFT, the approved examination is developed by AMFTRB. So similar to the LCSW requirements, applicants for LMFT are to request prior exam approval. And if all education requirements have been completed, the applicant will be deemed or will be admitted to the exam for licensure. And then they also license mental health counselors, which is similar to LPCC. The examination is, of course, the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling Examination that's offered through NBCC. So applicants for licensure by endorsement may use the NCE exam that's offered through NBCC. So in order to take the exam, a master's degree in mental health counseling or related to the practice of mental health counseling from a regionally accredited institution must be obtained prior to being admitted to taking the exam. Applicants for MHC or mental health counselor examination are not required to have board approval prior to taking the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling examination. Applicants are just directed to apply to the Center for Credentialing and Education to take such exam by submitting an application in their official transcript to be admitted to take that exam. So we also looked into the state of Texas, another big state, and I'm just kind of going to go over more of like their licensing process because it's a little bit different and it kind of shows when the applicant or the candidate can take the exam. So per the Texas Board of Examiners of Marriage and Family Therapists, per their website, for in-state candidates to be eligible for full licensure as a marriage and family therapist, the candidate must first hold a license as an LMFT associate and complete supervised training under a supervisor approved by the board. So to be eligible to be an LMFT associate in Texas, a candidate is to have a graduate degree in marriage and family therapy or a related field from an accredited program. And they also have to pass the licensing exam at that time. That's administrated or that's offered by the AMFTRB. And so once they obtain that LMFT associate license, that's when they're able to begin accruing the required supervised clinical experience to become fully licensed as a marriage and family therapist. And per their Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors, their requirements are similar to the eligibility for in-state candidates for full licensure as an LMFT. So to be eligible to be an LPC, it's the same process. The candidate must first have a license as an LPC associate in the state of Texas and then complete the supervised training under a supervisor that's approved by the board. So again, first to get that licensure or to be eligible to become an LPC associate in Texas, They have to have the degree in counseling or a counseling related field. And then that's when they'll have to take and pass the National Counseling Exam or the National Clinical Mental Health Counseling Examination that's offered through NBCC. And again, that's when once they obtain that LPC associate license, then they could begin accruing the required supervised clinical experience for full licensure. And then also approval isn't required from the Behavioral Health Executive Council to take the exam. So for LCSW, lastly, per the Board of Social Worker Examiners website, their process is a little bit different for social workers. For in-state candidates to be eligible for a clinical social worker license, the applicant must, quote, hold a license as a master social worker in Texas and complete supervised training under a board-approved supervisor. In-state applicants are to complete 3,000 hours of supervised practice and 100 hours of direct supervision in no more than 24 months and no less than 24 months and no more than 48 months. So once the minimum requirements are met, the supervisor will complete the verification, the clinical experience verification form, and provide it to the supervisee or the applicant. And then in turn, the applicant will apply to take the clinical exam that's offered through ASWB.
Great. Thanks very much, Sarita. Excellent information. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a picture what the process to take the exam and for licensure looks like in other states. So you can kind of see that not every state requires, like we do, somebody to gain their entire 3,000 experience hours before they start taking the clinical exam. So that's good information to have. I'm going to discuss a few more changes that this proposal is considering making. That has to do with the California Law and Ethics exam, for one. The proposal would allow an associate to choose when they took the California Law and Ethics exam. Right now, an associate must attempt the California Law and Ethics exam every year as a condition of registration and renewal. And that was put in place in the exam restructure in about 2016, I believe, because the board wanted the person to have passed the law and ethics exam as an associate because they are treating clients. However, right now, we have a new requirement that associates now must complete 3 hours of CE every year covering California law and ethics. That started in 2023. So staff believes that public protection could potentially be maintained without requiring the California law and ethics exam to be attempted every year. So under the proposal, associates could instead of taking the exam every year until pass, associates could choose to take the exam when they feel they are ready. They could take it either before or after they take the clinical exam. They would not be required to attempt it every year. However, it still must be taken and passed before a subsequent registration number would be issued and also a license is issued. It's still a requirement for those two things. Making this change would also prevent delays with registration renewal if the applicant forgot to take the exam every year. Right now, we sometimes have applicants that are registered as associates. They forget to take the California Law and Ethics exam, or they forget to attempt it, and then they go to renew, and we tell them, no, you can't renew until you have attempted it. And so their registration renewal gets delayed. So that would eliminate that, and they would still have to be taking the CE. Another change that this proposal makes is kind of getting into looking at the age of experience hours that comes up as a barrier sometimes to licensure. So in this particular proposal, it places an age limit of 7 years on a passing score for the California Law and Ethics exam. Currently, there's no age limit on the California Law and Ethics exam score. Not having an age limit on this will have public protection implications the longer the California Law and Ethics exam has been offered. Right now, it's been offered since about 2016, and the board currently must accept all scores regardless of age. Placing an age limit on the L&E exam score has certain implications. In order to obtain a subsequent registration number, the California Law and Ethics exam must have been passed with a score no more than 7 years old. That would include second or third, et cetera, subsequent registration numbers, meaning the exam would need to be passed again for each subsequent registration number, or basically every 7 years if the person didn't move on to licensure, ensuring that they stayed current and had a current score. In addition, when applying for licensure, the California Law and Ethics exam score would also need to be no more than 7 years old. So that's one other change. Another change is the proposal changes the amount of years that a registration number is valid. So, and also the time that supervised experience is valid. So it extends the allowable length of time of a registration number from 6 to 7 years, and extends the amount of time that supervisor experience hours are valid until they expire from 6 years to 7 years. So it allows a little bit more time there. And so you can kind of see where we're going here with a sort of a theme. We're basically trying to get under the proposal, everything to be no more than 7 years old. So it's a little bit clearer. So under the proposal, and this is summarized in attachment B, the applicant's experience hours, clinical exam score, and California Law and Ethics exam score would all need to be no more than 7 years old when they applied. And then finally, the last thing that we did in this proposal, which this actually could be pulled out and run separately, but it kind of fits nicely here, is we would make an exception to the prohibition on private practice with a subsequent registration number. This proposal, so the proposal is making a change to the so-called 6-year rule that prohibits an associate from working in a private practice with a subsequent registration number. Under the proposal, the law would continue to prohibit associates with a subsequent associate registration number from working in a private practice generally. It would, however, permit an associate with a subsequent registration number to request a one-time, one-site 2-year hardship extension. So with the extension, they may finish gaining their experience hours in one private practice setting if the supervisor or employer and the associate submit a request to the board providing specified information. The board has discussed the prohibition on private practice with a subsequent registration number numerous times, most recently in August 2022. It's often requested from stakeholders as a discussion topic because it can cause hardship to individuals who, due to some unforeseen circumstance, either medical or just life in general or whatever, need a subsequent registration number to gain experience hours and find that they can no longer keep their private practice job. The discussion at the August 2022 meeting, it was discussed of removing the prohibition on private practice with a subsequent registration number. However, there was concerns from both board members and stakeholders about potential for exploitation of associates. So there was not support from the board or stakeholders for its complete removal. So today's proposal offers a more limited approach that could apply for a limited time if there was an instance of hardship. So I just want to say again, that's the proposal on the table today. We consulted with the examination unit when drafting this initial draft, but it's very complex. So we will continue to need to consult with our exam unit and our licensing unit and our legal counsel as this proposal evolves. We just wanted to kind of put it out there today to get initial thoughts and feedback so that we can determine how to move forward. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, fellow committee members, any initial questions here?
Sorry, I'm trying to find the raised hand here. There we go. Just one of those.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, not so much of a question as just a comment, really. Thank you, Rosanna Serena, for your hard work on this. It is the language is very detailed and, lack of better words. So I appreciate that you're looking at that. We are looking into streamlining the language. I see that's going to be a challenge. And I also appreciate the out-of-state references. I think that's just a best practice. It's always good for us to do that when we're looking at making substantive changes. So I just wanted to make those comments, and I'm going to hold my question for now, but I just wanted to thank you for that presentation.
Okay, Member Huft.
Yes, thank you. Oh, I want to echo Dr. Walker. Thank you, Roseanne and Sarita. I have a series of questions. Do you want them all at once or one at a time?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
That way we make
So-
sure we get them answered.
Yeah. So the law and ethics for MFTs, the exam can be taken basically immediately, shortly after graduation. Why are we looking at now a clinical exam waiting 875 hours? I think I'm missing that piece where that anchor is coming from.
So right now they have to wait until they have all 3,000 hours. So that basically means that it sort of holds up their process at the end. They have to apply for eligibility. Once they've gained the hours, have us review their application and wait, and then take the exam. If they don't pass it, they finished all their hours and they wait. This would allow them, while they're still gaining their hours, to start taking the clinical exam so that at the end they can get licensed more quickly. However, there was concern, Psych Board is letting people do it right away after they graduate. We've kind of heard some concern from some that, really you should have some clinical experience before you take the exam. We started at just 1,500 hours, which is half of the 3,000 required total. And then we kind of got some feedback that, it's really the direct clinical counseling hours that makes it so that people are most likely to be qualified to pass the exam. So 875 is half of the required direct clinical counseling experience hours, basically.
Okay, so the 875 is half of that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And where are we getting the 7-year age limit from? Is that based on some sort of empirical data of how long it typically takes, or where the pipeline problems are?
No, it usually, on average, we found pretty consistently from data internally that it takes between 2 to 4 years on average for somebody to get through the licensing process. The clinical exam score is good for 7 years. Right now, we allow the hours to start expiring after 6 years. We're really just trying to get to a point where it's something that easy we can implement. It's like 7 years. Some boards do like 10, some boards make it within 2 years. It's really just, it's kind of, we're taking the clinical exam, we allow it to be 7 years. We don't want to have another thing that's 6 years. It's like, let's just make everything 7 years.
Sure.
That way it's easy for the applicant to understand and know. When I turn in my application, I can't have anything more than 7 years old.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then my last question is really more of a request. I want to preface this by saying I really like these changes and I urge the committee to be moving forward with these. But I do hope that staff can be identifying licensing changes in other states. So specifically what I am hoping for is identifying states that have created this sort of change in exam processes, and then identifying 2 possible outcomes. One is if the population of therapists changed, demographics or the rate of increase in size. And then 2, if the number of complaints against therapists changed as sort of a rough proxy for improper therapy being done. If we are able to identify some other states that have enacted a similar sort of change in their exam process, and we see that it has not led to an increase in complaints against therapists, or it has led to an increase in the rate of new therapists coming on board, like those would be good things to know. We want certainly to have to be addressing these pipeline problems as a board, but we also, I think, want to be evidence-based as much as reasonably possible. So if I can direct the staff to try and collect some more data, that would be helpful. But I do want to really emphasize, I think that we should be moving forward with this in the meantime. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
I just wanted, this is Eleanor Reedy. I just also wanted to thank you both for your reports. And I think these would be helpful ways to decrease barriers. I wanted to say too, that 7-year rule, I have heard of people kind of missing their ability to be able to take the test because, maybe they might have been simple things, or maybe they had catastrophic things too. So it would keep our possible applicants within, range to be able to still test, and even if they need that extra hour, those extra year. So thank you for your report, and I do like the hearing the different states, especially the ones that are similar. As far as I know, there's not too many similar to California because we're pretty diverse, but maybe even the like I think even I don't know what Texas would be, but some of the larger places too. Or but thank you.
Thank you. Roseanne, do you have any comments before we go to the public that you want to add?
No, I'm not really. I think, yes, definitely this is something we need to research more, and it's helpful to know exactly what the committee would like to see and stakeholders as well. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. This is not something that we're planning on, running right away. We really want to think it through. So yeah, we're looking for feedback at this point. So thank you.
Okay. Great. Are there any comments there in the room?
Yes, there is.
Shanti Ezrin with CAMPS. CAMPS continues to support allowing applicants to take the clinical exam earlier than the completion of the 3,000 clinical hours. We're really happy with the direction so far in the draft proposals and don't see a harm to consumer protection in allowing this change. And also, as it relates to the other items that are interrelated, we don't see any concerns with those amendments. Thank you.
And that's it for here.
Okay, thank you. Moderator, would you open for comments online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. It looks like we have a couple requests. I'll go in the order received. First, I have Ben Caldwell, and Ben, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ben Caldwell, MFT. I want to echo what Shanti was saying. Really appreciate the work of staff on further developing this proposal and the research on what's been happening in other states and how they do this process. The proposal in its current form doesn't raise any concerns. It really, I think, weaves together some of the prior conversations in this committee really nicely. The proposed changes here would seem to have a variety of positive impacts on the licensure process without appearing to raise any concerns with public protection. A couple of notes related to the discussion here. It's obviously not an apples to apples comparison, but not too long ago, Illinois removed the exam requirement for BSW licensure. So they do licensure of social workers at the bachelor's level in addition to the clinical license in Illinois. When they eliminated that exam entirely, it meaningfully improved the number of people entering into licensure in the profession and did not, at least so far, appear to correlate with any kind of a disproportionate increase in complaints to that licensing board. So it didn't seem to have any negative impact on public safety. Again, not apples to apples, but that's kind of the best, most recent data that we have. And as it relates to the change in the process for psychologists that has been approved by the legislature, I think, Roseanne, you had mentioned that they're allowing folks to take the EPPP upon graduation. It's actually earlier than that. The way that that bill is written, somebody who is pursuing psychologist licensure is eligible to take their exams upon completion of the academic coursework requirements. So even if they haven't finished their internship,
15
haven't finished
seconds.
their dissertation, even without their degree being done, they would still be eligible to take that exam. So there is clearly movement in this direction. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator. Next, I have Kathy Atkins, and Kathy, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
This is Kathy Atkins with CAMPT. I wanted to thank the BBS for moving forward with all these various aspects of this issue. I recognize that this is sort of a marathon, not a sprint, and we support the intent and general direction of everything we see here. Obviously, we want to bring it back and sort of stare at the words and the language a little bit harder and make sure there's no unintended consequences. But generally speaking, we want to thank the committee and the BBS for moving forward with these kinds of licensure issues. I also underscore that while some of the numbers may seem it's hard to understand where the numbers come from. At some point, you do have to land on a number. So we appreciate and look forward to continuing this discussion. And again, we kind of, as Shanti noted, have a very positive initial review of this. So thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Well, thanks for the great feedback. And Roseanne, I don't think you need a vote from us, just these comments, and we'll keep moving forward on this item.
Yes, we'll continue. We'll go back and take a look at some of the questions that Justin brought up and do some research on that. And we'll continue to work. We'll consult with some of the stakeholders to get further feedback if they have it. And then we will bring this back to another Workforce Development Committee meeting.
Great. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 6, discussion and possible recommendation regarding amendments to the alcohol and substance abuse coursework requirements for all board regulated professions. And Christy, I think you're providing us with this overview.
Yes, thank you. So we're looking at the alcohol and substance abuse coursework requirement for all the boards for license types for applicants who hold an in-state degree, although there is a sort of a side discussion on out-of-state that I'll hit at the end. This coursework is required for all 4 license types. For LMFT, LPCC, and LCSW applicants, it's required in some cases prior to associate registration, and in one case prior to licensure. It's required of all LEP licensees prior to their first license renewal. So I'm going to talk about a little more about the different requirements among the professions, and then I'll talk about like the course content and hours as well. So it gets really complicated here, and I've tried to kind of streamline it because for LMFT and LPCC profession, we have sort of 2 sets of applicants. We have people with older degrees who have to do additional coursework post-degree, or a lot of times they have it within their degree program, but it doesn't have to be in their degree. And then we've also got the newer degree, people who started their degree program after August 1 of 2012 have to have this coursework within their degree program. And the way the number of the course length and content is a little different even within these categories. So I'm calling them category A and category B. So category A is the people who have to have the course within their degree program. So for LMFT, the number of hours and units for these category A applicants is not specified, but there is extensive content listed that must be covered. For category B applicants, and these are people with older degrees, they must complete 15 hours of coursework prior to licensure. So it can be taken via CE after their degree program. One caveat, the law is written so that LMFT applicants who began graduate study on or before January 1st of 1986 are not required to have this coursework at all. LPCC profession, very similar, except for your category A, where the course has to be in the degree program. They are required to have 3 semester units or 4 quarter units of coursework in this area. And then your category B applicants who can take it after, it's just like LMFT, they have to have 15 hours and they can take it via CE. For LCSW profession, none of them have to have it within their degree. They have to do 15 hours post-degree. A lot of times, again, it's within their degree already, but they can take it post-degree as CE. and it has to be taken prior to licensure. And I should mention for LMFT and LPCC, they have to have it prior to associate registration. So, well, there might be a little difference with LMFT, but I'll get back to that. So for LCSW, yeah, I have a different section on course timing, so I'll just continue on this road here. For LCSW applicants, it is not required for those who matriculated before January 1st of 1986. So I think when this law was put into effect, they exempted certain populations. And, you know, we get very few applicants that have such an old degree, but we want to make you aware that that is in the law. And again, LEP, they have to have it prior to first license renewal, and they have to do the 15 hours. So I already talked about differences in course length. Most have to have 15 hours, but those that have it specified in their degree program, it is different. LMFT, there's no specific number of hours, but it has to be extensive content covered. LPCC, category A, it's 3 semester units or 4 quarter units within the degree. And then, okay, here's the course timing. Category A LMFT applicants and LPCC applicants have to have it before obtaining an associate registration. The category B applicants, LMFT applicants, as well as the LCSW applicants required to have to take it prior to obtaining a license. And I'm sorry, that category B in the memo should also include LPCC. Nope, no, it shouldn't. Category A, LMFT, as well as all LPCC applicants have to have it prior to obtaining an associate registration. See, even I get confused, and I've been looking at this stuff extensively. Category B, LMFT applicants, as well as LCSW applicants have to have the course prior to obtaining a license. And then all LEP applicants have to have it prior to first license renewal. So there are some these differences. It makes it can make it hard to, remember, although we do have different staff evaluating, for the different professions, but we're starting to do some cross training. So it is a little bit hard sometimes. And then course content. There are some differences in required course content depending on if you're category A, category B, LPCC versus LMFT. Any of the ones I mentioned that have to have a 15-hour course, that course content is specified in regulation, so that's all the same. But for those who have to have it within their degree program, that's where it differs. And I have that listed out. If you look at attachment A, that's part of the packet, it does list, these different groups of applicants and what course content they have to have. And you can see that it is a little bit different between them. And again, it's, because the people who have to have it in their degree program, they're taking it at the graduate level. Those who can take it via CE, it may or may not be considered graduate level coursework. And so, if we do want to make some changes to these requirements, and I do think we will want to because there's some outdated language at minimum, but I just wanted to make you aware, like I have other times that I've presented additional coursework discussions, is that making any significant changes to course content that's required to be in the degree program could have a negative impact because if we change it, it could result in someone having a non-qualifying degree, meaning they would have to obtain a new degree in order to qualify for registration or licensure. So we'd have to be careful about how we do that. We could, if we wanted to change it, we could make it acceptable for any new content to be obtained outside of the degree program or only require degrees obtained after a certain date to include the new content. However, both of these options have some drawbacks. If we want to make it possible to obtain outside the degree program, it's more documents as part of that have to be submitted for staff review. And if, say, we get through this whole review of all the different topics for additional coursework, we could have a lot of extra paperwork showing they've completed more course content, which could lead to increased application deficiencies. But our staff are experienced with reviewing, complex applications, so it's doable. But they already do have some sizable lists of coursework to complete, especially your category B applicants. if we were to only require degrees obtained after a certain date to include the new content, it would really create a new set of degree programs with separate review processes and forms. So we already have the category A, category B. It would create a category C, which would result in staff having to evaluate against 3 separate sets of degree requirements. And we'd have to have a pretty delayed implementation to give schools time to incorporate the new content. But if we made some minor changes, such as changing terminology, such as substance abuse to substance use, it wouldn't have this type of impact. So there are some things and tweaks we could make. And then for the applicants who have to take or are allowed to take the courses via CE, it would not be as big of an impact. We could just have a delayed implementation so that it gives CE providers time to update their courses and for applicants to take an updated course if need be. And then just a note about out-of-state applicants. Applicants under Path B, applying for licensure under Path B, which is not where they're coming in under the portability provision. It's where they're coming in where they've been licensed for less than 2 years in another state or are unlicensed, and we're evaluating their education and experience. So these applicants have to complete a graduate level course prior to licensure. So there's some, we kind of question, maybe we should look at, should that be required at a graduate level, since many in-state applicants can take it via CE? So that would be something we could look at as well, because taking a graduate level course, they're very expensive and it can be hard. Not a lot of schools accept people to take graduate level coursework if they're not enrolled in a graduate program. And the other thing is that if we wind up where we want to make changes for in-state, we should, especially for course content, we should look at what course content is required for out-of-state applicants. And there's also an inconsistency that we noticed for LMFT Path B applicants. They have to do 30 hours of coursework in this area. So where in-state applicants only need 15 hours, most in-state applicants, I should say. So I did make some recommendations here. I don't think I've done this really in past memos, but with this one, it's pretty clear where we were thinking that there could be some changes made. So this is just a starting point. Some of this would need to go, through a subject matter expert. But the first one would be getting rid of that exemption for the people who have, well, for LMFT, it's those who began graduate study honor before January 1st, 1986. And then the way the LCSW laws, LCSW applicants who matriculated before January 1st, 1986. Very small difference in wording, but it is different. But I think we would want to consider getting rid of that, because it's regardless of, it's inevitable that a mental health professional will encounter clients with a substance use problem. And it's imperative that professionals be informed so that they can adequately assist these clients. So that's the first recommendation, is that we get rid of that exemption. On course timing, we recommend that applicants be required to take the course prior to associate registration with no exceptions, except that LEP does not have associate registration. So we would say require it prior to licensure rather than at first license renewal. And this is to ensure that all practitioners are able to adequately assist these clients. And then for LEPs, requiring specific courses at first renewal often lead to CE audit failures. And then in terms of course length and course content, we're recommending that a subject matter expert review the required course length and content and make a recommendation. And then CE versus graduate level for out-of-state, we're recommending that this course be allowed as CE for out-of-state applicants due to the cost and difficulty sometimes getting the courses at all, and it also creating some equity with in-state applicants. So I guess I'll turn it back to you, Wendy, to see if if changes are if you would like us to work with them, work to develop a proposal basically for this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Any comments from board members? Justin and then Annette.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with any of these staff recommendations, and thank you, Christy, for putting these together. I do wonder, however, what's striking the exception for MFTs prior to 1986 would look like. If you can explain that just a little bit more,
Sure.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, it would just mean that they would need to take a course prior to obtaining an associate registration. So it wouldn't affect their ability to qualify. They would just, it would probably look like taking that 15-hour course, just like some of the other applicants need.
Yeah, and under this proposal, aren't you recommending it be continuing education that they could take? They wouldn't have to re-enroll in a graduate program to complete the requirements. So we're not talking about a huge burden for probably a small number of people this could potentially affect.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of these staff recommendations seem reasonable.
Dr. Walker.
Yes, thank you, Wendy, and thank you to Justin. That's a great segue. I concur with what you were saying. There were some of my similar thoughts as well. So just my thought about the course content from the SME, the subject matter expert. Would you be able to bring that back and share that with us? Because that really just resonated with me. Honestly, I'm trying to carefully select my words here. I want to be respectful, but I am truly concerned about the course content more so than like what we're looking at right here, making changes that will impact or not impact, what's already, present. But that course content seems to be something that does need to be looked at, giving some of the professional licenses that we have an opportunity to have hearings with, as board members. So I'm really, looking at this alcohol and substance abuse coursework requirement as far as the course content is related. So again, sorry to make that long, but would you be able to share that?
Yes, absolutely. So what we would do is work with probably more than one subject matter expert on this topic and to draft some proposed language, because this would need to be changed in either statute or regulation, possibly both. So we would bring it back to you as a proposed language to first discuss at committee level, and then it would keep moving through the process. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, again, you've done great work here too. This is complicated, so I do also appreciate your recommendations that you brought to our attention today. And if possible, if we could use some of the best practice language like grandfathering in certain individuals that have started at a certain time, when we look at years and things like that, that is something that we might be able to do as well, just to streamline the process, but also, make the impact seamless as possible and not raise any eyebrows if we're really not making subsistence. Okay, Wendy, you say that for me 5 times. Subsistence changes. Am I making any sense, Chrissy? I know there are some that can be grandfathered in, and we do want to take that into consideration.
Definitely. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
It's Friday afternoon, Dr. Walker. I'll get a pass. Eleanor.
Yeah, thanks for the information. I would, as far as the exemption for the people from 1986, I was thinking they've been in practice almost 40 years. And I mean, we want people of all, experiences. So a little bit of my concern, even though I do agree that a lot of people that we'll work with will have substance abuse, alcohol issues. But my concern is that they may miss it, or they may not, possibly even not be as technologically savvy, or they might miss it. And I part of me doesn't want to jeopardize losing someone who's licensed. So my suggestion is maybe encouraging them to take those courses. So anyway, that's just a thought. So
it wouldn't affect somebody who's already licensed. So this would just be applicants for licensure. So it would be the rare person that has a 40-year-old degree applying, but it happens. So that's who it would affect, new applicants.
Oh, okay.
Great. See, do we want to make a motion before we go to public comment? Do we want to hear public comment first? Mr. Huft.
Justin Huft, I motion to move forward with the staff recommendations.
Second, if needed.
Sabina, is that a acceptable motion for us?
I think it's acceptable.
Yes, so it would be, I actually prefer if we'd clarify a little bit more as what exactly we're recommending. And you can say is stated in the memo dated, and you'd like to recommend to the full board for a proposal?
Not yet.
It's coming back? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
bring it
I'm bringing it back. Yeah. You don't really need a motion.
Okay, so if we amended the motion to just move forward with the proposals.
Yeah, you don't actually need a motion if we're just bringing it back to here. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
true.
I thought we were recommending it to the full board.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I guess we don't need a motion today.
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of the way this is going to work is we're at each workforce development meeting, we're looking at a different topic. And then we're going to bring this back because well, we'll have to figure out how we're going to bring everything back once we've gotten through all the topics, but as one big package, or if we're going to piecemeal it again, but it was just too overwhelming to bring everything at once. So we'll just keep working in the background. We'll bring a new topic to the next meeting. And in the background, we're working on the ones we've already talked about. So to bring back at a later time.
Okay, then we will go to public comment since we don't need a motion. Any comments in the room?
Yes, there are.
Hello, Shanti Ezrin with CAMP. Christy, I just wanted to thank you for the overview and your work on this. And also one of the attachments in there about the comparison charts were really helpful to kind of get a better understanding between the different, I think you were calling them categories. So that was really helpful. And overall, we really appreciate just the intention behind these changes to make everything more consistent and less confusing. But just given the complexity of this whole thing, as you noted, I think as the proposal is being worked on, we would like to bring it back internally, take a closer look at the different attachments, and then circle back with staff as the proposal is being worked on and brought back to the committee in the next time we meet. Thank you.
And that's it for here.
Great. Moderator, do we have any comments from audience members participating online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 7, discussion and possible recommendation regarding the Workforce Development Action Plan. And Steve, will you provide us with the overview?
I will, and it will be a little less tedious. So kudos to you guys. That's just amazing work. So I feel kind of embarrassed sitting up here doing this one, but hey, we'll go for it because this is important too. So the last meeting we did discuss the licensure pathway survey that we did, and it identified barriers. We were trying to identify barriers through the licensure pathway, looking at education, supervision, and the examination. And then also we included in there the actual applying to the board and getting your registration or license. From that, what was requested was that we look at some short-term and maybe long-term goals that we can, that the committee can look at to address some of those concerns that were raised from that survey. And so I kind of brainstormed, came up with some short-term, long-term goals. I'll go through them right now, kind of explain where my thought process was on these. And then, open it up to see if there's any additional items that you think we might want to pursue as a committee, or if you want to highlight ones that you think are really important to, move forward as fast as possible, that would be great. So really, when looking at the short-term goals, a lot of this is really looking at more research and actually outreach and education, because there was a concern brought up from the survey where people, first of all, didn't necessarily understand the pathway. Educators may not have been preparing people through, for their next step in the licensure process, maybe didn't have the resources necessary to help students understand that. So really the looking at possibly organizing more not necessarily outreach, I put it at outreach here, but outreach or listening sessions. Having targeting listening sessions for educators, supervisors, and associates to kind of talk to us. They've supplied information through the survey, but maybe we have listening sessions where we can actually hear from these groups to get more detailed information on how we can help. The next thing I'm looking at is reviewing the existing outreach materials that we do have, and then looking at ways to improve upon them, or I do know there's additional materials that we can actually produce that will help the educators, supervisors, and associate having a better idea of the licensure pathway and how to get through that process. Additionally, there was a concern of the supervision, maybe not getting the best supervision possible. So I think it's really imperative that we do possibly look at creating better information for supervisors, giving them more tools as maybe best practices, or just helping them understand the rules of supervision. And I think that's kind of really important, because we want to give them the tools, all the tools possible that we can to help them in that supervision process. And then one thing was creating a dedicated web page, or increasing our outreach, or not outreach, but publication of highlighting available grants and scholarships for individuals pursuing a career in mental health. Currently, we do post and we kind of coordinate with HCI. They have scholarships and loan repayment projects, but I think there's an opportunity to actually be able to put out more information on that. And maybe our website and our social media can be a hub to help supervisees going through the process, understanding what's out there for them. The long-term goals, you'll notice that I put in the long-term goals because I think it's important to put in there. A lot of the discussion that we had earlier, talking about the path, talking about what Roseanne was doing, or what we're proposing with the examination, making changes to the examination, not the examination, but the ability, making changes for early eligibility for the examination, looking at the 6-year rules, changing it to 7. Those are really long-term goals that I think would definitely benefit everybody during that licensure process, and it will address a lot of the barriers that we do hear about. Beyond that, looking at creating more outreach to not necessarily people already in a school looking at becoming mental health professionals, but looking at actually providing outreach to high schools or high schoolers or undergraduates. I put that in there because one of the goals, I believe, for our workforce group is to expand the diversity and to expand the diversity and to encourage people to pursue a career in mental health. So I think it's a long-term goal because that definitely would require more resources. So there might have to be projects to get more resources, and we have to figure that out. And then developing materials appropriate to kind of go into that scope would take some time, just because we would want to have appropriate material that that could actually speak to them. We're good at speaking to, I think, the licensees and the supervisor and the associates, but it would require a different type of outreach. Looking at possibly, as you noticed in the survey, the cost of licensure can be a barrier to some. And we're looking at, I think one of the things we could do is explore the possibility of looking at where we can either, I put in here modify fees, or looking at certain fees that we might be able to either waive or modify, so that it could increase someone's ability to make it through the pathway. That's a long-term goal that would require a lot of discussion and surveys. So looking at the possibility of providing a no-cost exam preparation course. This would be like for our law and ethics exams. Currently, ASWB does something interesting. I may have talked about it before in this committee, where if you don't pass the exam, they offer a test prep from a third-party vendor, and they will give you kind of tips and guidelines on how to approach a test. It's not necessarily going to be concentrated on the actual content of the test, but basically test taking tips and skills. So that's one other thing. And trying to think here. The other one, I have it in here twice. I think there's part of the licensure process. To get through the licensure process, you have to collect your supervised hours. And currently we are looking at, and this is a long-term goal of mine, I want to put it down here though, is making it easier for candidates or applicants to licensure to be able to track their supervised hours to go through the process, because that can be tedious. And then actually making the application process simpler for them. So looking at the possibility of creating a system like that where an applicant can track their supervised hours and directly submit them to the board, instead of the paper that they have to collect and maintain and organize. So we're looking at that. And the other thing I put in the back of the last one, enhance supervision oversight by implementing real-time submission of supervisory forms and conducting regular supervisory audits. Currently, right now, we do not, I think we discussed this in the board meeting, we have the ability to audit supervisors. Currently, we are not doing that. Once again, it's a resource issue, trying to find the time to do that and the staff to do that. But I think it's something important that we should actually pursue. And currently, we collect all these supervision forms after the 3,000 hours have been completed. With our proposal, actually, I guess that would change, and we would start to collect them earlier. One of the things that I've been contemplating, and I don't know if the committee thinks this is something good, but we have the supervisory agreements, and those have to be filled out at the beginning of supervision. I would love to find a system to be able to collect those in real time instead of years later. One of the things that I think that could help out and maybe reduce the barriers is that we could actually review and let the supervisee know if that's an appropriate setting and that the supervisor is okay. So it would help out, and then the audits would actually help out with, we could not in the audit, I'm thinking not necessarily to penalize supervisors, but to maybe find a way that we could use the audit to coach supervisors, or not necessarily, I guess, coach, but just, well, I guess coach. I'm going to say coach. That's coach supervisors, not for penalizing them. So I think that would help the supervisees, and it could, it definitely is good for consumer protection too. So most of the other ones I had in there kind of related to what we were talking about earlier. And I think I would open it up for any suggestions, comments. Wendy, if you want to open it up.
Great. Dr. Walker? Thank
you so much. I want to jump in. I'm starting to have some technical difficulties. I'm actually joining you all from Texas today. So I apologize for all the busyness in my background here. I am so encouraged by this survey, Steve. Thank you again for a timely and quick turnaround on not only providing us this great feedback from the survey, but actually doing something with it, you know, with the help of us all working together as a committee. This is a really quick turnaround, and I'm really, really pleased to see you bring this forth today. My only comment would be, is it possible to move from the long-term list, the second to the last bullet, can we move that up to short-term?
Yeah. I,
And
yeah.
that's related to the financial support.
Okay.
So it seems like something we can brainstorm together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my only request. Again, thank you for putting this together so quickly.
Any other committee members?
I think those are some good suggestions. One thing I would ask, I know we're talking about maybe making some study materials available. Something I know that helped me when I did mine was like an electric practice test. I don't know if that would be, you know, what they have the answers for the ones that you are able to review. So I know that was helpful, but maybe that could be another possible thing made available.
Okay.
Great. And Dr. Walker.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask Steve. I like the idea of listening circles. Is it possible to also maybe conduct some focus groups? I know they're slightly different and the outcomes are somewhat different, but just maybe something for consideration. I don't know if we can even do it, but
Let me look into that.
okay, just a thought.
Mr. Huft.
Thank you, Steve. I also agree that I think study materials, and we've talked about this in board meetings before, would be very helpful. I actually want to push back gently on the idea of these listening sessions for educators and supervisors. They are already licensed. They are not in the pipeline, and I don't think there's a reason to suspect that they would have a deep, nuanced understanding of the pipeline problems. They work with people who are in the pipeline, but that's not at all, I think, intrinsically valuable. They're not the ones that are navigating it. And so I guess I would caution us against soliciting information from people who are removed from that process. Not far removed, but that doesn't seem like the primary source of information. So I want to note that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from committee members? See, it's just Friday afternoon. Voices aren't working anymore.
Actually, one more thing too. Actually, a lot of these short-term goals, we did create an outreach and education committee, which I think a lot of these short-term goals will be moving their way over to that. And Dr. Annette Walker can actually, she's the chair of that committee. So we'll be probably working on a lot of those short-term goals on that. And yeah.
But I would say another thing might be if there's resources that we know of that are free or like inexpensive, affordable, like even public libraries where we can direct people, you know, applicants to study materials. That might be another, or even websites that might be helpful.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and get comments from the public. Steve, are there any folks in the room that wish to comment?
There are.
Hello, Shanti Edrin with CAMP. Steve, thank you so much for bringing these important goals forward today. Please just let us know and other professional associations know as well how we can help achieve those goals. And as always, we are going to take it back, look at it more closely, and provide some more feedback back to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for here.
Great. Moderator, do we have any online participants who wish to comment?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand icon. And it looks like we have a request from Ben Caldwell. Ben, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Thank you very much, Ben Caldwell, MFT, and I would echo Shanti's comment. Thank you, Steve, for bringing up these goals. These are all worthwhile and good. I would respectfully suggest that the committee consider as a long-term goal identifying and reducing disparities in the licensing process. I think we all share an interest in improving the diversity and representativeness of the mental health workforce. I think it would be helpful to see that specifically called out, as that can help drive future committee and board work. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Is there no further comments on this item? Steve, I think you've gotten some good feedback here.
Yes, and I think what I'll do from here is hopefully for the next meeting, we can kind of further define some of these and put some additional items or tasks items within this, and maybe we could present that again just to kind of keep it going, and then go from there, if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, suggestions for future agenda items. Do we have any members wishing to suggest any future agenda items? Seeing none, do we have anyone in the audience wishing to suggest a future agenda item? Anybody there in the room?
You do not?
Okay, moderator, do we have anyone online?
This is the moderator. At the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment for future agenda items, please click the Q&A icon or use the raise hand icon. And it looks like we do have a request from Elise Springer. Elise, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Marriage and family therapist from Postpartum Support International, California chapter. I apologize. I think I'm adding this public comment in the correct place, but making a request for future agenda items in the work group regarding AB 2581 on maternal mental health, in light of the additional passing of AB 1936, which is screening for perinatal mental health. I know this had been commented on in prior work force meetings that it would be on the agenda, but both of those particular ABs have now been signed and chartered, and just making the request. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests, and I'll keep the Q&A open for the next agenda item as well.
Okay, thanks. Before we move on to that, though, Steve, I just want to reach back on the maternal mental health bills. We discussed those in Policy and Advocacy Committee. So as earlier this morning, as the implementation kind of moves forward, which committee should audience members be monitoring for the implementation of those bills? What
I
would
believe
be
the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting.
Okay.
I'm thinking. Or
We need to
board.
talk about that,
Yeah.
I think, more. Which one? Because we're talking about coursework here.
Oh, that's true too. We are
Yeah.
talking about coursework in this committee.
So
I would,
Okay.
sorry, stay tuned.
now that they're signed, we'll regroup and figure that out.
Yeah, so maybe there's no answer here. I just did want to make sure that folks knew that we
Oh,
were aware of those bills and working on implementation. So one of those two committees, we will see some future action on
Discussions,
those.
yeah.
Okay. Item 9, public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any board members with comments for items not on the agenda? Seeing none. Do we have any audience members that have comments for items not on the agenda? We'll start in the room there. Steve?
We have none.
Okay. Any online?
This is the moderator. I've left open the Q&A for members of the public to indicate if they would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda. You can either click the Q&A icon or use the raise hand icon. All right, it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, that gets us to item 10, adjournment. Thank you to everyone for participating today. As a reminder, our next board meeting will be on November 14th and 15th in Sacramento, and we look forward to seeing everyone then. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.